to do, so you can bring those back in, get them to complete that work in accordance with their contract, and then place them on a period of furlough. So it's what we're calling a bit like the furlough hokey cokey. You may get employees back in and out as your business needs.
Okay, right. Okay, great. And what if employees refuse to be furloughed? Is that a possibility? Have they got the right to do that?
Yeah, so furlough is a brand new piece of legislation. It didn't actually exist in UK employment law until the announcement a couple of weeks ago. So you have two options. Okay, so the first is if you get to the point where you do need to furlough your staff, go back and decide which staff they are. It might be everybody in your business, or it may be key individuals or departments that you choose to place on furlough. Once you've identified who you're going to furlough, go back to their employment contracts and have a look. Now, what we're finding is that some contracts of employment do have what we call a layoff and short-time working clause. If you have that in your contracts of employment, you can rely upon that to enforce the furlough. So you don't need the employee's consent. However, if you don't have that clause, you will need to make that as a proposal to the employee in writing and get them to consent back. So either in writing, via email, text message, or even a telephone call, you need to get their consent. The option for an employee if they refuse, well, what other options have you? You've got no work for the individual, and so you would then be having that, what I call a grown-up adult conversation with them to say, we don't have any work. If we don't furlough you, the only other alternative is potential for redundancy. And then they need to determine whether they want to pursue that as a route or whether they agree to go on furlough.
Okay, thank you. That's really clear, actually. Yeah. Okay, so another question that's come in. One of my employees is asking to be furloughed so that they can shield their partner. Can I do this?
That's a very difficult one. So I suppose that if I go back to the first part of the question, is that they're concerned because of their partner who's shielding. Now, shielding is where the member of the household has received a letter from the NHS or a text message saying because they're in that critical group, they have to shield for 12 weeks. Now, we know friends and family who are in the same household are worried because if they're not doing the same, they're worried about bringing the virus back to their family member. Unfortunately, there is no provision anywhere in the guidance that permits you to automatically furlough your employee because then they're not shielding themselves, they're not in that critical group, and they're not sick either. So on those scenarios, there's plenty of advice on the NHS England and on the government website that gives them hints and tips about how to protect their critical family member whilst they're continuing to work. If the employee is still saying, I can't work, I don't want to work, I'm too worried, and you have got work for them to do, then again, what we're saying is if you can reasonably allow them to stay away from work, is there anything they can do from home for you, whether it's not in their normal job, but anything else to add value? If not, then the only alternatives is paid holiday or unpaid leave. But we're saying be supportive in those scenarios because you can understand about the stress and anxiety they're going through. If, however, you genuinely don't have any work for them to do, then you can obviously furlough them along with all your other members of staff. But just going right back, no, you can't furlough just because they want to shield.
Right, okay. It seems the common theme is just to try and keep talking, have a good conversation and be reasonable, I suppose.
Yes.
On both sides.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think this is a big employee relations ongoing engagement piece as we go through this, and it's going to extend into the weeks and months. And therefore, if you've got valuable staff that you want to keep hold of, it's trying to be as flexible as possible, meeting their needs, but getting them also to understand that you've got a business to run, and if we don't keep the business going, they may not have a job at the end of the process anyway. So it's finding that mutual common ground and finding the solution through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right, thank you. We'll go through these questions quite quickly. So, right, our next one, can I furlough an employee who is currently off sick with the virus?
Okay, so this is the other side. So there's, we have the shielding, which we've talked about. Social self-isolation is another category, and that is for anybody who has the virus themselves or a family member has the virus in the same household. If anybody is in that category and they haven't been furloughed before, they're entitled to statutory sick pay. They're entitled to the statutory sick pay from day one, and that should be paid up until the point where they come out of self-isolation. Now, there's a really good diagram on the government website that really details the period of self-isolation. But just in summary, if you have the virus yourself, you have to self-isolate for a minimum of 7 days. If a member of your household has the virus, but you don't, you have to isolate for a minimum of 14 days. Now, during that 14-day period, if you then contract the virus, you stop the clock on the previous and you then isolate for a further 7 days from the day you get the symptoms. So worst case scenario is that somebody may be in self-isolation for up to 21 days. During that time, and they're getting SSP, you as an employer can reclaim back up to 14 days SSP for COVID-related absences from the government. Once somebody comes out of self-isolation, you go back into, have you got any work for them to do? If so, business as usual. They come into work, operating the social distancing and all the other strategies you put into place. But if you don't have any work, then at that point, you can place them on furlough if you get their agreement.
So, like, can I say, so if somebody said after sort of, let's say 3 weeks, I've still got the virus, or I've got something, I'm still ill, what happens then? Does that just keep pushing it forward? Yeah.
Yes, I think, unfortunately, I've had some friends who have had the virus, and they've said that it's probably, they've had the virus for about 5 or 6 days, absolutely knocked off their feet, but actually it's probably taken them in excess of a week just to feel, to have the energy to be able to get up and behave normally and get back into the community. So if, for instance, somebody does get the virus, say on day 14, yes, with any sort of flu-like symptoms, it can take anything up to 2 weeks to fully recover. So yes, it would potentially extend.
Yeah, and then I guess it also falls on to whatever's in your own HR staff employment as well, about sick leave and how you treat that. And
yes, so if there is, if you do pay company sick pay, then that will prevail in accordance with your contract over and above the SSP. But at least you can claim 14 days SSP back from the government to contribute to that company sick pay.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So this is our last question coming in, and then I'll unblock you all so you can join in. Can staff take holiday during the period of furlough?
That's a difficult one. there is no clear guidance at this moment in time that impacts that. So I'm saying if you can hold on, hold on. The reason for that is twofold. The first is that the guidance on furlough clearly states that you have to be available for work. So if you've booked a period of holiday, you're not available for work. So we believe that that might curtail any application for the furlough grant if somebody is taking leave during the minimum 3-week period. The other factor on that is following the announcement last Friday by the government that holiday can now be rolled forward to be taken over the next 2 years if somebody could not take their entitlements due to COVID-related reasons. So then again, that suggests that holiday may not be permitted whilst they're on furlough. I think the key thing on that, and I know a lot of my clients are saying to me, I've got so much annual leave in the system, how on earth am I going to cope over the coming weeks and months? My recommendation is, first off, is check when your annual leave year runs from. It varies, there's no standard pattern. So it could be a financial year, it could be calendar year, academic, it could be absolutely anything else. In my company, our holiday year is based on our actual birth month. So my holiday year runs from March to March, and that varies. Work out when people tend to take their holiday, so you can see whether you would be able to accommodate those annual leave requests during your annual leave year, and whether you're going to have a glut of leave still left in the system. And then also work out how many people can you afford to have off on annual leave at any one time, so that people may be booking holidays later in the year for cancelled Easter holidays, WIT holidays. They may want to push that back later into the year and have a winter sun holiday. Can you realistically afford to have a lot of people off at that time? Once you know all of that, tell your staff what you can do and what you can't. Encourage people to plan their holidays along with their colleagues, so that you're not adversely impacting on everybody, that you're not refusing holiday left, right and centre. And reinforce to people, don't book and pay for a holiday down the line without getting your permission, because there is no guarantee that you will be able to approve that. You can always enforce people to take holiday. So once we come out of this challenging period and we're back up and running, if you want staff to take holiday and they don't want to, because it's not in their normal time that they would book holiday, then you are legally entitled to do so. You just have to give an employee double the amount of time for what you want them to take. So for instance, if you want them to take a week's holiday at your saying, then you have to give them 2 weeks notice before that time. So I think that's one for you to think about moving forward. Do some real planning, work out how it impacts on the business, and then communicate that to your employees so they know exactly where they stand.
Okay, that's great. That's good advice. Yeah, sorry, there was one more question that came in. So if people have been furloughed, from the employee's point of view, are they allowed to make the odd phone call, ask them to do small jobs? So I guess it blurs the lines a little bit, but can you do that at all, or is it a straight line? Or
it is a difficult one. So furlough says that you should not be undertaking any work for your employer, but we know that doesn't exist. So if employees are taking the email or pointing somebody who may be working to where a file is or something like that, I think that would be fine. I don't think anybody's ever going to challenge that. I always say, work out, if somebody was on maternity leave or somebody was off long-term sick, you may have the odd question because they're in a unique role. You might agree with them to answer a few odd questions. If you work it on that basis, and therefore nobody could argue that it's substantial work which would end a period of sickness, or it would end the statutory maternity periods and they would be returning to work. I think if you use that as that guiding line for furlough, I think you would be on the right side. But if somebody is doing a lot of work at home, then that would be treated to be work, and therefore they would come out of furlough.
So, I mean, the employer, apart from it being wrong with the guidelines, it's the employer that would be taking the risk and crossing the line possibly. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no risk to the employee. They're still going to get paid. It's whether the revenue would, and they've clearly stated on the web pages that they're reserving the right to come back and thoroughly audit all these claims. So they may turn around and say, actually, during this period of time, this person was actually working, and therefore they will either not make the grant, or they will reclaim part of the grant, or it in full, depending on their findings of the audit. I think talking to our network, we've seen quite a lot of unscrupulous practice, shall we say, bandied about by employers telling staff that they've got to come into work, but if they're ever asked, they've been furloughed. We've had staff trying to have pay increases so that 80% is actually 100% of earnings. So lots of practices going on, which I know the revenue will definitely be all over and auditing. So my advice is stick squeaky clean and make sure your records are fully up to date and on file, so that if you're asked any, you've got that as a record. My also other tip on that with your records is make sure you date and time stamp any decisions you make, because the guidance is changing so rapidly. Just make sure you time stamp it and saying which piece of the government advice you were referring to at the time, because it may have been right and proper when you made the decision, but it may have been updated a day, a week later. So that's an important record keeping for you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, right. So this is where it could all go wrong now. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and we'll have some comments if anybody wants to make them. So I'm just going to mute you now. If anybody has got a TV or radio on in the background, if I could just ask you perhaps to turn it off or down, the microphone seems to pick up everything.
How about children? Could I just lock them in a cupboard?
That'd be good, wouldn't it? Yeah, looking after children is a difficult one, and we're seeing all the time. So I suppose the key thing for that one, first off, is if your employee or the employee's partner is a key worker under the government list, they are entitled to an education school place. And that is clear in the guidance and was updated this week. What we are hearing, though, and you might have an insight on this with the local authorities, we are hearing, though, that the local authorities are actually turning away children unless both parents are key workers, because they're facing difficulties themselves. What I've suggested to some of my clients in that situation where they're having difficulty because they've got nobody to care for that child safely, is that maybe writing a letter to the local authority explaining that your member of staff who isn't the key worker is still vital to keep your business running, and therefore you would appreciate what they can do to support and find a safe place for the child during at least some of the working hours of the day. Regardless of that, though, whether they're a key worker or not, there is nothing there in the sense that if there's work to be done, can you work flexibly with them? Can they work different working hours? So can they work early and late? So at the beginning and at the end of the day when maybe their partner's at home, or they can leave the kids in bed for a little bit longer, or chuck them in front of a video or something. Can they do a night shift? Can they work weekends? Think about different ways about how they can actually undertake their role. I think the other key thing as well is with home working and working more flexibly, one of the things I'm saying to people is we're very good at presenteeism. We're very good at managing somebody walking through the door at 9 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock or whatever the working hours. But what we aren't so good at is actually measuring outputs. And actually, you know, even genuinely myself, I do 7-8 hours minimum a day, but actually genuine productivity time when I'm in the office might be only 3 or 4 hours a day when I genuinely get something done. So therefore, just have a think about that and saying, actually, could somebody genuinely do 3-4 hours a day, be as productive, and think about that as a way of moving it forward, still so that they're on their full 100% earnings, but they're balancing childcare with the business need. I think it's just having those conversations with people. If that can't happen, then it's parental leave or paid, unpaid leave, like I mentioned earlier with a shielded family member.
Anybody else got any other questions they'd like to ask? Anything burning away? No? Okay, well, if you have any questions, I'm going to put the details on in a second. But Elaine is, as I said, from Eagle HR, and I'll put the details. The details are actually on our website and on our Facebook page. I'll put the details up here on a second. But Elaine, they can contact you, can't they, at Eagle HR?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I'm always happy, you know, if it's just a quick question, I'm not going to charge you. So don't worry thinking I'm like somebody who'll have the clock on as soon as you call. Please contact us. We're here to support the local community. So don't worry, we'll support you as much as possible. If I don't know the answer, but I have a wider network within the Harrison Clark Rickabees, they're our sister company. So if I don't know the answer, I'll reach out to one of my colleagues and get something through to you. And just keep an eye on our website. And if you want to go on our distribution list, we're doing regular updates. Drop me an email, I'll pop you onto our distribution list as well.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Elaine. Thank you for joining us today. I think everybody's appreciated that.